right, you guys, welcome to another episode of Car Talk. I'm your host, Big Mike, right here with.
Ryan Bossery from Rywire.
And today we are going to discuss the rise of the vintage Japanese car. Now, we clearly know that there has been a very respectful cult like following for all of the cars we're about to mention. There are people who have dedicated themselves, shops dedicated to these things. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about in the mainstream.
Yeah.
And it has become very mainstream. The values, Barrett Jackson, Meekum, TV. I mean, these things are now, all out.
Prices are just
Absolutely through the roof. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss that. We touched on value a little bit in a previous episode of Car Talk, but this episode we're kind of going to go over the cars, the classics, and their rise through the mainstream. So I mean, Ryan, I know this is something that you've thought about a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, you own a classic,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you feel like I mean, you have Japanese classic car show for
Right.
years. You could go and there are just these sections
Sure.
with just amazing cars that these people probably bring them out just for JCCS.
One time, like one
Right.
day a year.
Right. So I mean,
Yeah.
so they've been prime examples.
Right.
But I mean, for someone like you who it wasn't an investment. You didn't know your Wonder Civic was going to be anything.
No, right.
You just had an opportunity to get a clean one,
Yeah.
and then you ended up, fixing
Yeah.
it up. But I mean, what is it? What do you think it is that has brought them to the mainstream, like general public?
We're talking like Hondas first, right?
Sure.
So I mean, I think I think that there's a lot of key like points that we should discuss.
Yeah.
So that would be aftermarket support,
Okay.
right? Maybe key players that brought them to the mainstream,
Okay.
right?
Whether they wanted to or not, whether they realized they were doing that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or like, let's say, a lot of people, if you ask them about 911s, for example,
Okay.
because I kind of, when we like barely talked about this a little bit, we were talking about it and going, well, it's kind of like the easy thing to compare it to is like the 911 curve.
The P car curve.
Right.
Sure.
And if you just single-handedly look at a couple of the key players,
Yeah.
you got like videos like that. The Magnus Walker video is very like memorable.
Okay.
So there's this video of him and he's driving his car, and if you guys haven't seen that before,
You're talking about Urban Outlaw.
sure,
That's the
that
name
one.
of
That's
it?
the one.
Yeah.
I forgot the name. I've seen it before, but I haven't memorized it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that video, maybe some will say single-handedly made certain people aware in
For
the
sure.
mainstream
For
of
sure.
the vintage 911.
For sure.
And then there's these key players that are building them. Like, you have these inspirational shops that have been, these doing it for forever,
Mhm.
they've been doing it forever. This is the car that they love. They don't want to change their mindset.
Yeah.
Same thing goes with the Japanese imports, and
Yes.
more specifically with the Hondas, right? I mean, literally the car that I first bought when I was a kid, and the first car I ever got into was the first generation CRX,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or it would have been the equivalent to a third gen Civic.
Civic, yeah.
And that was the first car that I owned, the first car that I modified, the first car that I wanted to build
Yes.
was that car. And there's a ton of people like me, that was their first car. That was the car that they wanted to build. For Honda, for example, that's where they call it the Wonder Civic for a reason, and that's because the people that designed that vehicle were trying to build and turn a budget car into something sporty.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, that's really where the Wonder Civic changed in 1984.
Yeah.
It literally went from an econo box to a sporty econo box, and then people just started modifying it, and you had companies, even back then the support was from OEM Honda, and that would
Yes.
be Mugen, right?
Yes.
Tsuchihiro's, did I butcher his name? His son was in charge of modifying these cars, and that's what they were doing. They were racing these cars.
Mm-hmm.
So you had high-level support from key industry
Sure.
companies, as well as people, as well as aftermarket support. All those things are key elements, right?
Yeah, I think that the whole Mugen thing is a really like prime thing to bring up because you have Nismo and TRD, and you have all these other versions where on a OE level.
They're starting that trend.
Yeah.
And then you get your HKS and your, your Japanese tuners that trickle down into like your Spoon Sports.
Sure.
And then you get stuff jumping over to the United States. And then you get your rye wires. You know what I mean? Like,
okay,
all
but here's
the way
the thing,
down
though,
to
right?
That path.
So the Wonder Civic, it's in the 80s, considered a classic. Anyone who looks at it will appreciate that. But I mean, I almost feel like, for the sake of argument, I almost feel like that's on the trailing end of a mainstream push.
It is.
Right? I mean, we're talking about things like, classic Toyotas.
Sure.
And Datsuns and Nissans that are at the forefront of being completely commercialized.
Yeah.
And like mainstream popularity, not just because of their value, but because of a variety of things. And I mean, I feel like the Wonder Civic, as a Honda enthusiast, I love it. And I love your particular one in particular.
Thank you.
Brandon Merlot's. As far as resto mods, I love it. Yours, without the engine bay, is almost a museum piece. Because the interior looks like it's 5 years old, not 30 years old.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The interior on his Wonder Civic is ridiculously flawless.
And I just lucked out,
Yeah.
John had brought that in.
Yeah.
He had started even gathering some parts to make it perfect.
But there you go, right? That's an example of, if someone were to find that now, a survivor, as they call them, of a Datsun, it's like 40 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Dude, I randomly saw a Z just parked in a parking lot just the other day. And you could see the rust from 5 feet away. You could physically see the rust. And it was terrible condition.
Yeah.
I assume that they drove it to that parking lot, so it probably ran. But they wanted $6 grand for it.
Yeah, you know what? And honestly,
maybe that's like an okay deal, but I looked at it, I'm like,
well, because before that wouldn't have been 6.
Yeah, it would have been like a couple $100.
Yeah, I know people who've purchased those cars, but see, that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about an exponential growth. Like, in 5 years,
oh yeah,
they have shot straight through the roof. So you brought up the P-car thing, and there's that one video, and Magnus
and you can
Walker
follow that curve,
and
though.
Rod Emery, people whose names kind of come up. But okay, so what about for you? Like, when it comes to these Japanese cars in the last, let's go 5 years, right? Like, what builds stand out to you as being the ones that sort of pushed these chassis and these styles of cars into the face?
Are we talking just Japanese historic in general?
Yeah, that pushed them into the position to even inadvertently be the catalyst to shoot them up in popularity and value.
Let's just think about it like on largest platforms, and that, I guess you could say the largest platform is going to be SEMA.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And then you got the year that I brought my Integra, Sung Kang and Greddy.
The Fugu Z.
They built the Fugu Z.
And just because of the movie, The Fast and the Furious, and Sung Kang's popularity,
and he being
that
associated to it, and then Greddy, doing such a good job just building the car for forward with him.
Yeah.
It was a huge hit.
Huge. Still is.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah.
So, that car really popped off the mainstream.
Yeah, because he's so huge, and then
everybody
the
saw
car
it.
was on display, like prime front and center. So definitely. Absolutely, that's a good example.
That was a huge kickoff, and then it got picked for the video game.
Yeah,
and then it was on the video game, so the normal enthusiast could build and drive or whatever the car.
So that's going to help ingrain it. So people who might not have cared about Z's before that. So that's a good one.
The one that you guys did with Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
And that was it wasn't like the first like the Sung Kang that early, but a year or so after you guys did that, and then right after that it was just like tons of great builds.
Yeah, that was in the Nitto booth in
Dominic's car
in 17. Dominic's Hakotora
truck.
The truck. Yeah, you guys got to look that up.
His Z.
Yes.
Those were really great builds, both of them.
Oh yeah.
And it was just like, and then all of a sudden it's just like hundreds more.
Okay, so let's touch on that real quick. So Dominic's truck, and then his Z. Sung's Fugu Z,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was one other Z. What's his name? Is it Chris Forsberg?
Chris
The
Forsberg.
Formula.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the gold one,
Yep.
right? That was on the cover of Super Street.
And then he had a
Very
five
cool car.
ten. So
Yeah,
he's
very cool
he's
car.
really into Dodsons. and
Yeah.
stuff.
He has a wagon.
Wagon. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice too. So
Mm-hmm.
there you go. Since you're talking about mainstream platforms, SEMA as far as an event, and then the one I did is Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
So that's
and that reached like
millions.
millions of people.
As far as views, sure.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to acknowledge that until about a year or two after people were saying, look, whether you wanted it to or not, it's part of the reason
Mm-hmm.
that Z's are so up there. But I mean, like I said, guys, we know the shops that have been just their whole thing has been Z's or classic Nissans or Toyotas. I mean, talking about classic Toyotas, Big Mike Munoz, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just got back one of his cars from Dubai. So
Oh.
he has a car that he restored so well, and it's so beautiful. So a lot of people don't know that in the Middle East, they are die-hard Japanese car enthusiasts.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like, for real, for real. And so this collector, who is very wealthy,
Okay.
like laughably
Of
wealthy,
course. Yeah.
but was so respectful of Big Mike Munoz's build that he did try to buy it, as I understand it, but Mike declined and said that Mike literally says, and it's willed to Toyota Japan.
Oh wow.
When he dies, they're gonna put it in their museum.
Okay.
That is how well this car is restored. And this Dubai collector leased it or rented it, or whatever the right term is, for a year, just to have this Toyota on display in his private collection, and then sent it back.
Like in his garage or
Well,
like
he
a
has
public,
I'm-
private.
I don't know how to answer that.
Anyways,
But his
yeah.
garage probably is like the most grandiose thing ever.
Sure.
But in his collection,
Yeah.
and then to just give it back.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then Big Mike's building a TRD rally car. That's like, I mean, I don't even know where he's finding the pieces to this.
Yeah.
Right? The motor's like one of 4 left in the world.
Huh.
Oh, it's wild. So you have the people who are diehard Toyota.
Yeah.
Like I said, JCCS, you guys, God willing, we're able to have another event, and the guys, at JCCS can have it, in Long Beach the way they've had it all these years. And you have to go. Even if you're not from California, you need to come out for that event, because you will see some of the rarest and coolest Japanese classic cars. I mean, it's called the Japanese Classic Car Show for a reason. It's just the best, man. Absolutely the best. So, I mean, okay. So we've talked, Nissans and Datsuns. I mean, talk about Nissan, a car that has had value for the longest time, but is now even completely unattainable, would be a Hakosuka.
Yeah.
I mean, that Skyline's $250,000 minimum now.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, if you get a non-GTR 180,
Yeah. Yeah, they're fetching crazy numbers.
crazy numbers.
And honestly, when I look at those, I'm like, wow, that's like a perfect car for that. That fits this exactly.
Yes.
Like if I think of one vintage Japanese car,
Yes.
that is like on the top as far as my looks and feel and style,
Yes.
that's like 100% the one.
So for you, would you have ever doubted that car would fetch these prices?
No, I'm actually surprised. I mean, maybe they just made
That-
a lot of them, but like the 2000 GT, you're talking north of $1 million in some
Right.
cases.
Right.
I mean, I would think that a primo, like restored by one of these high end Japanese shops that specializes in Hakosuka GTRs.
Okay.
I mean, those should be over $1 million.
Well,
Because they're just
maybe they are.
They probably are,
I know
yeah.
that the homie Eric at JDM Legends,
yeah.
they had one for sale that was like, was it 240 or 280?
Wow. Yeah.
But it wasn't even a GTR.
It wasn't a GTR.
But it was like a restored.
It was restored like a GTR.
Something like that. This was a
Yeah.
couple years ago. I haven't checked the site in a while. What up, Eric? I need to check the site. But when I saw that up, I was just like, so that's what they're going for now, right? But I mean, I feel like that car is so revered in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course the people here who've always loved them.
There's a good amount of them though over there. That's probably why.
I see.
Because
I
if you
see.
think about like quantity, the
in the
2000
'70s they were cranking them out.
Yeah.
Mm.
2000 GTs,
So there is I've never thought
way
about that.
way less of them.
Okay, so we're talking about SEMA and television and then video games, right? So Sung, being Fast and the Furious, actor, and then his build, and with Gretty, and then SEMA, and then like Dominic's builds,
The
and then
big mics, plural.
oh god, the Z that I in 2017 Nitto Tire booth.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But then on television, but then why do you think that those types of things did it? Because the following's been there. People have been going to JCCS, and people have been following JDM Legends having a show on their channel. That's clearly going to show more people.
I think vintage stuff is just really
In
popular
general.
right now. In general.
Well, when it comes to fashion, vintage is totally a
yeah,
thing. So I guess
mid-century architecture.
yeah, homes.
The
You know what?
houses
That's a good
are,
point.
Are higher than they've ever been.
Maybe it was just a matter of time.
It's a circle, right? It's a big. It's
Well-
coming back around.
Well, I
again.
mean, okay,
But it won't go away.
music,
Yeah.
fashion, vintage is a thing, right? And people are also like, look in fashion right now. People are trying to make new things look old,
Sure.
right? Photography, people are taking digital photography
Yeah.
and trying to make it look like film.
Right.
Okay, so maybe that's just a thing. But I would like to say, I have a couple theories. Okay, so when we come back, I have a couple theories as to, I think some of it's coincidence, some of it's timing, and I think a lot of it was just straight up inevitable. And you know what? We'll kind of we'll discuss that when we come back. See you guys in a moment.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ryan from Rywire here, and today I have something really, really cool to show you. What I want to show you guys is that nothing that I'm doing here is so far-fetched that you guys can't do it at home. We don't have any CNC, there's no 5-axis machine here. I'm literally just using my brain and hand tools to get a really, really cool project done. Even in the most basic conditions, a beautiful outcome can arise.
Think Bigger podcast. This is a branch of the Think Bigger project that is a brand and a movement and an ideology that was created to better the community and the culture around it. How you behave in your relationships, how you build a car, how you do anything comes from the way that you think. And if you can start there, then everything else will follow.
All right, guys, and we're back. So, Mike, you had a theory about this. Let's hear what you have to say.
I was just thinking, right? Let's talk about like, what is the upper echelon? So we talked about the biggest, SEMA,
Pebble Beach.
right? But upper echelon of automotive collections and displays
Yeah.
would be the concourse.
Concourse. Well,
Pebble
concourse
Beach.
in general.
Yeah, Amelia
but Pebble.
Island, Pebble Beach,
Yeah.
right? Concours d'Elegance. And Pebble Beach is like, the one. And in these events, they didn't even acknowledge Japanese cars.
Like, not at all.
No, and they do now. I even had the honor of helping curate and then judge the Japanese showing at the Coyote Creek Concours,
Yeah.
which is a
in
smaller
San
one.
Francisco.
Yeah, in Northern California. And I mean, this is, for people that may not know what a Concours is, okay, but for those who know, if you have an entire type of vehicle that's not acknowledged and now they don't just acknowledge it, they have a class for it. I mean, this is no joke. I mean, that is something that's, you can call it elitist. It's a whole different tax bracket. It's like a laughably different tax bracket. But you now have these collectors who are very much after these Japanese cars.
Right.
And my whole thing was, I don't know if you want to call it a theory or just a train of thought, but I feel like whenever something is rare and the rareness of it, the rarity of it is acknowledged, I think it's only a matter of time before it becomes coveted.
Yeah.
And whether it be because of things like SEMA or TV, most certainly the internet, it was just a matter of time, I suppose, before these people were going to end up saying, okay, well, I have this Rolls Royce collection, Bentley collection, right? Pre-war, post-war, that's how they break down the Concours.
Yeah, right.
And those wars were not only here.
Yeah.
All right, so those wars are applicable to the world, and so I feel like it just sort of made sense that after they like if someone has all of these Aston Martins from like the James Bond all the way up till now,
Hmm.
what if they acknowledged whether they wanted to or not? They just started realizing that there's this rarity factor
Yeah.
to these Japanese classics
And the desire for the next thing, really.
for the next thing. That's kind of exactly what I'm thinking.
It's like okay.
Does that make sense to
Yeah,
you?
you collect baseball cards, right?
Okay, yeah,
Collecting baseball cards. You've collected all the baseball cards that you want. You have like all the different players. There's only
Yeah.
X amount of players, and
so would you move to another sport?
then you go to basketball cards. Like you know what I'm saying? It's kind of the same style thing. You're still collecting cards,
I mean,
but you're just going to like the next popular thing.
sure.
And then the natural progression is going to be like
Like if you've gotten everything that you think you could have
and there's
wanted,
a ton of people that collect basketball cards.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people that collect and buy and restore Japanese cards.
sure.
So then those like head honcho baseball card collectors
Mm-hmm.
are gonna just the next popular thing, and then all of a sudden the values of those cards come up
Sure.
to almost levels of the baseball cards.
Okay, so for you guys watching, what do you think? Do you think that the rise in mainstream popularity of vintage Japanese cars was inevitable? Do you think that it's a good thing? Do you think that it's a bad thing? I mean, for anyone who wanted a lot of these cars we're talking about,
And then now they're
And-
out of reach.
yeah, just like the NSX is not even a classic in the sense of age,
Yeah.
but by every other definition it is, and it's effectively unattainable.
Yeah.
Right? For the average person,
Yeah.
anyone who thought they may have been able to get one, I mean,
It's always going to be a little bit.
it's
out of
just a
reach
little
now.
bit out of reach now. And there may be a tapering off, but will it ever go back to you finding any of these cars for 2, 3, 5,000? An NSX like 16, 20,000? Hell no.
No way.
No way, right? So, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think that TV, SEMA, the internet, any of those things, any of the builds we mentioned, or because look, you've written for the magazines, I've written for the magazines, and before we wrote for them, we read all of them. I mean, dude, there's so many Japanese shops that specialize in classics.
Right.
I mean, you've been to TAS so many times, but I mean, I don't know, like Rocky Auto.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
Yeah, and their
Right?
cars are amazing. When you see
Yeah.
them at SEMA, they're standout.
Yeah. And that's just one of a bazillion examples, not to put them above anyone else, but that's just an example. They've been around for how long? They've been doing it for how long? And there's just so many. And then on the U.S. side, because, Peter Brock was racing Datsuns. I mean, it had its place.
Yeah.
But it wasn't this mainstream coveted thing. I know the guys at Z Car Garage in the North, they have the craziest cool cars in there. And
right.
they've been doing them.
Yeah.
So it's always been this, like, niche.
When you start like seeing things, and then you just start getting it like pow, pow, pow in your head,
Yeah.
then like it's just natural, man.
Yeah.
You want it,
Yeah.
You keep seeing that like a really nice Hako every every
Dude,
couple weeks, and you're
it's-
just like, I really want that now,
But dude, like, there's something about certain cars. So I don't know how you cannot look at a Hakosuka Skyline and not think that fucking car just looks crazy cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Z's 240s. Everyone loves them more than 60s and 80s, but just take the Z. I mean, there's just something about that.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. They just killed it. It is ingrained, the flow, the nose, the shape,
Well, maybe those little crash bumpers in the 70s, those could probably go.
They were kind of big.
But the body
Yeah.
is perfect,
Like the GT.
Yeah.
Oh, the swooping nose.
yeah.
And, it's just so crazy looking. But I mean, look, we're talking about, like, I think that we're just talking about it now, and I think that we're going to be talking about this in 20 years, 10 years, because FCs, FDs, Mark IV Toyota
Yeah.
Supras, NA1 NSXs, CRXs, right? Not even third gen
Yeah.
or Wonders, just 88 to 91.
Yeah.
Those are going to be this exact thing in 10, 15 years.
10 more years, yeah.
It's just, that's why I think it's inevitable. But my question for you guys is, Do you think that it was inevitable, or do you think that it was effectively forced to exist as far as blowing up mainstream? Or are you guys mad about it? I know many purists that wish that this was still underground, you know, cult like bubbles here and there, and you have like a JCCS where you could come and enjoy them. Maybe
It's
not
like
just
rap music too. You know, like there's gonna be people that are like, oh, you know, these certain guys are making it a certain way, and
Oh, I see.
it needs to stay underground.
I
It
see what
needs,
you're saying.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I'm just
it,
curious because I mean, what we're talking about. I mean, all right. So we mentioned like an FDRX7, an
hmm
NA1 NSX, and a Mark IV Supra.
right,
Those are already starting to become unattainable.
yeah,
Like especially the survivors. Oh, they're worth so much money.
yeah,
ITRs are going through crazy amounts,
yeah. That's wild to see those.
and that's a mid '90s, late
Mhm.
'90s. What?
Could you imagine the prices of those things
What
in
is that
10
gonna be
to
in
20
10?
years?
Yeah, dude, that's a good point. So, what is it, you guys? I mean, if you have to pause to type out your comment, I really want to know. I mean, of all the ones we mentioned, which is a dream car for you? None of them, all of them. Which one? You're blessed to have a Wonder Civic. You've had an NA1 NSX.
Kind of wish I still had that.
Yeah,
Not gonna lie.
but you have the Wonder Civic,
hmm
right?
Yeah,
That was at the Peterson, right? For like 2 years,
2.5 years, and I just got it back.
and he just got it back.
Just got it back, and I don't want to start it because it hasn't been started for 2.5 years.
So do you want to like diagnose it and like check it first?
Yeah, I want to just like
Make sure they didn't like leak out oil.
No, just like drain the gas, change the
Oh,
oil.
for sure, yeah.
All those little things.
Yeah,
'Cause,
before you fire it up.
Yeah, I don't really want to like have any issues, so just go through everything real quick.
If you guys are not aware of Ryan's Civic, you've got to look it up. It's really nice. I mean, we've touched on it. You've mentioned it a
Yeah,
couple
we
times in
talk about it.
in other episodes. But any of the cars we mentioned, Dominic's truck, Chris Forsberg's Z's, the Z I did on Discovery Channel, Sung Kang Z, Big Mike's Big Mike Munez's his two builds like are just crazy. Let's see. Let's see who else had a Hako in the E Neos booth. Remember that one at SEMA?
Oh yeah,
Right, that one was
very
beautiful.
nice.
That used to belong to
Yeah, whose was that?
that was Chanash
Okay.
from
yeah.
JDM Chicago.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe he sold it, but
All right.
it was his at the
So
time.
that was his car.
Yeah.
Because I
And-
remember he was on your podcast, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then I didn't know what car he had, and then but I saw that one at SEMA. Was that 2 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then Daniel Song's White Z that JDM Legends did.
Oh yeah.
That was in the E Neos booth.
Also,
the
Daniel
next
Song
year.
had it done by JDM Legends.
Well, part of it, and
Mm.
then he brought it, and they completed it.
Okay.
Yeah,
got it.
but it was the first episode, first two episodes of their
Okay.
JDM Legends show.
Okay.
So that's what helped make that car so popular because
Okay.
it was on the show.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking about a lot of Z's because the Z has a ton of history, but I mean, there are crazy followers for Mazdas. I mean, the homie Savant Young from Vintage Japanese Motor Union.
Oh yeah, we just did a harness for him.
Mhm. Okay, so there you go, right? So
Yeah.
RX3s, and
Is
we
that
talked
like
about
He's like
RX7s.
an old like MMA fighter, right, or something?
Yeah. So his I mean the rotary cult like following for that, FBs, FCs, and FDs of course, but then RX3s.
Mm-hmm.
They're just really fucking cool cars.
Yeah.
All of these things are.
I think like 13B engines just in general are kind of have their own like crazy Japanese historic cult following.
Oh yeah, and here too.
yeah.
I mean, rotary guys are pretty hardcore, no matter how many Apex seals they go through. But
Keep making them.
what is your guys' favorite? Do you guys aspire to own any of the ones we've mentioned? Why do you think that these cars just became worth so much money? And do you think that it could have been prevented? Maybe the better question is, do any of you watching think it should have been prevented? Because I've heard that before, and I actually find that to be a very interesting perspective. Interesting because I almost don't even disagree.
Mm.
I think, I think that building a cool car and going to SEMA is one thing, but I don't think people really. I don't know how much thought people put into what this may or may not do to the the mainstream culture. I mean, SEMA's been around for 50 years. TAS has been. I mean, these things
Yeah.
have been around. So that's why I find it so fascinating that I mean, 5 years is the blink of an eye. In 5 years, they went up uh, two, three, four times in value, and on mainstream platforms like the Concours. Um, and I just don't know. I don't know if it could have been prevented, should have been prevented, but it does make it very hard because there were people who wanted them, and I don't really believe that they're going to be able to get them.
They're not.
Unless there's a big change in income or something.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, if you
Or
had,
they're getting like really crappy ones,
and then
like that $6,000 one that I was
that was
talking
like
about.
visibly rusted.
Yeah, but somebody's gonna buy it,
Oh, for sure.
and they're definitely gonna be paying, over what it's worth. But obviously, that's all to
That's all
the
relative.
eyes of the beholder, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so do you? What do you think? Do you think it was inevitable?
Yeah,
It
I
was.
think so.
It was
Yeah.
effectively inevitable.
Like I saw it coming, but I guess I just didn't. Like I was kind of blind to it.
Sure.
But I felt that was going in that direction. When like I remember our buddy Brandon bought a CRX, clean CRX, high miles, whatever,
Yeah.
$10,000, and I was like, wow, you
Right,
paid
right.
way too much for this
Sure,
car, right?
sure.
But then give it 1 year, and it's like, yeah, go out and try to find one that clean,
Right.
because you're not, and you're gonna spend $10,000 for it.
You know what? That's a good point. I remember I started to hear like just here and there
Yeah.
people buying a $10,000 CRX and seeing them, and I was like, yo, what? But I'm like, yo, that is pretty goddamn clean. That's really nice. But 10, I don't know. Now it's like, I know a guy who bought a CRX for 12, no,
Okay.
10,
Okay.
put like 3 into it as far as paint correction, shampooing,
Mm-hmm.
this and that. I think it was some shit like that. I don't know if I'm.
flip kind of a deal.
Oh, flipped it for like 20.
Oh, really?
It wasn't like $2,000.
Yeah,
It was like a
It was
lot
like
of
a
thousands,
lot, huh?
right? It was like a pretty for the amount of time. It was like a lot of thousands, and I was just like, somebody bought it for, and then I saw the pictures, and I was like,
It looked
oh,
good, huh?
it looked like they didn't just have it in a garage, but it might have been like temperature controlled garage.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, the gold zinc of the original bolts and screws was still shiny.
Wow.
I don't know what state that was. I don't know how. But there you go, right? Like I remember the Z on Discovery. There was a lot of hate within the community because it was a 2+2, which made people hate me less because the 2+2 is less desirable.
Less desirable.
But
yeah.
it was a survivor. It had like
Sure.
7,000 original miles, like some stupid thing.
Oh, so they were like, why did you?
Oh, dude,
like,
as in like
destroy or-
crucify him. Kind of like people who said that your life should be taken from you for what you did to the S2000. There were hardcore Z people
Yeah.
who were like, I hate you, and I'm going to be bitter about. To this day,
Yeah.
to this day, I get salt from people, and I'm just like, the amount of lack of understanding of
'Cause
what
you put
went
an
into that.
SR in it.
Yeah,
and-
well, I'm talking about the lack of understanding of what went into that television show. And you think that it's just that simple?
Yeah.
That's kind of like, it's kind of sad that you think it's really just that simple. But I get it. If you found a coupe with 7,000 miles and you tore it apart and put like a wide body, I kind of think I'd be mad about it too. But if you were so adamant about it, then you should have found it online and bought it and saved it for yourself.
Yeah, because I don't think that he did anything special to find that car. He just like
No, look at I mean you
looked
look
for
at
it.
you worked with Ballad to get a chassis. I mean, you could have just bought a chassis,
Sure.
right? Stripped it down, or if you really wanted to wait, find a crashed one, whatever, because you knew you were
Yeah.
gonna cut up. But the point is that like we were talking about in that episode, because S2000s are gonna be in this conversation in
I was
10
gonna
years.
tell you that I was gonna mention
They're
that
totally
too.
gonna be there.
I mean, you
They're already going up.
already since when we finished Angels that one
Yes.
to what are they like 17 or something
Yeah.
to now the chassis is just are
You have to buy one that has like 200,000 miles.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because they're already like, it used to be like 10 or 11. Now it's like 16, 17.
Yeah.
And a
And
pretty,
that's like a rough one.
a rough one. Like
Yeah.
a good one's like 22.
Right.
And you're just like, wait, 22? Right? I mean, I always thought they were worth it. I actually, for the S2000, was very curious as to why they depreciated so much.
Yeah, why did they
I
even
never
dip, right?
understood that.
Maybe there was actually a good amount, but
Yeah? But
yeah, that's really weird.
But here we are talking about this for 70s, 80s, and late 80s, even early 90s. So,
But-
of course, in 10 years, 20 years.
I mean, if I had to give one suggestion to the public watching, buy some S2000s. You're not going to regret it. Like, that's a good buy right now. They're still actually
attainable.
low.
Yeah.
They did dip and they are coming up, but it's like to me, I think it's like we're at like $7,000 at our Bitcoin right now.
Oh, I
If
see.
it's up at 30 right now, we're only at 7 right now. I think that the S2000 has a long way to go. I think it's just going to be an uphill.
All right,
here.
so Ryan says if you could find clean, low mileage Survivor S2000s, buy
Buy.
them and just hold on.
I would. I think it's a good buy because it's like literally Honda's sports car. It's like rear wheel drive. It's gonna apply to more markets too because a lot of people aren't into front wheel drive cars.
Correct.
And maybe a lot of people aren't into Hondas, but the guy that's into a Z
Yes.
could if he had to settle quote unquote for a Honda, he's going S2000.
You know what? The whole rear wheel drive thing is a good point. Just like NSX enthusiasts are almost entirely not Honda enthusiasts.
Right.
They're NSX
Always,
enthusiasts.
If
Like,
you've
for
ever
those-
been to an NSX
Meet.
Prime meet, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
If you have ever been to an NSX Prime meet, you'll understand that those NSX owners, they're not Honda enthusiasts. They're NSX enthusiasts. And I think that might be some kind of similarity to the S2000.
It's true. If you've ever been to one of those like homecoming things,
all the Honda Homecomings.
it's a different
It's a
beast,
different crowd.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the people who may segue into it, they might not look at it as a Honda for their own sake, but it being this like, rear wheel drive, sport coupe,
Yep.
almost perfectly balanced,
Mhm.
you know,
They'll talk about the displacement per horsepower per
yes,
yada yada yada.
you know, the
and
RPMs and it just being this like perfect roadster.
the gearbox and
Sure.
all the things that
I could see that.
destroyed on my
I
EV
think
one.
Ryan has a good point. I
Yeah.
think S2000s are good investments if you can find them. I mean, if you can find CRXs and EGs and everything
Might as
for a
well.
good deal somewhere, I say buy those too.
Hell yeah.
I mean, I don't really want you to because I want to buy them, but for the sake of deals and the appreciation of the market value,
yeah.
it's crazy, you know?
SIs. you
Yeah,
know.
SIs are already going through a lot, ITRs. But I mean, you guys were leaning towards Honda because that's, kind of the community and the culture we're like definitely a part of. But as you can see, we have a very deep appreciation for the history of all these Japanese cars. There's so much cool car history, and the designs, the timeless designs of some of these cars. I mean, they were always timeless to us. We're just talking about how they became mainstream popular.
Mainstream timeless.
Because the value going up and the popularity, as much as they should be hand in hand, they aren't always necessarily hand in hand because the price could be going up within its cult-like following.
Yeah.
But we're talking about you have a clean ITR like a 97 or 98. You put it on BAT and you're getting crazy numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the highest that the CRX went for recently? 33? Was it 30?
I feel like that it was higher than that. What was it? Only it was 30, huh?
You
30
guys know?
Yeah, I don't
Wasn't it in
remember.
the 30s?
There was one that that definitely jumps out, but I don't remember what that price was at.
I
It was a solid number for sure.
I think it was 30 something. I don't know if
Wow.
I've heard of a CRX going for 40, but you're hearing ITRs go for 70. $70,000. And I remember when I was going to get one, it was like it was a 97. And this is years ago though, guys, like 10 years ago. And I remember it being like 18. And I was just like, fuck.
You're like, oh, it's too
I don't know.
far
I was
out
like,
of
I
reach.
can't, I don't know, 18.
But if you could have just like grabbed a couple of those.
Yeah, yeah. If you know, there are a couple of really hardcore guys that I think just sat back and were like, wait, what? My Z or my Toyota or my Nissan or whatever, and then I don't know if they're gonna cash out or just keep riding it. But there's a lot of people who have been die-hard enthusiasts for a long time, and I know I said it before, but when they're able to do it again, you guys have to go to JCCS. You guys have to go.
It's been a
OEs,
while since I went.
Oh,
That I've
dude.
been, dude.
I go every year. I think I missed it for 2 years, except for last year, but I missed it 2 years in a row because I was out of state that
Mm.
same weekend hosting an event,
I think I've been out of the country as well.
and that's the only reason why.
Yeah.
Because I
I think
very
I
much
went.
love
I
that
went
show.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I couldn't find parking.
and did you just leave?
I just left because the whole parking lot was. I didn't get there early.
Mm. You guys, they did it digitally, you know, and then they have like Matsuri
Right.
Week, and they have all
Yeah.
these things now. And I mean, if that's how you have to view it, I would say view it anyways. But you know, so big shout out, you know, and respect to
And the people that put that on, like, it's like Koji and Terry.
yes,
They're really solid people too.
yeah.
And they've been
And-
into it for so long. I mean,
Yeah,
how
I
many
mean, he's-
years have they been
yeah.
doing that?
Yeah, I mean he
So there's not. It's not like, oh, let me get on the hype train and
yes,
like they've been passionate about doing this exact event that hasn't changed
no.
in what it's like on 20 years or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's just a display by segment, by tier, by make, by generation. I mean, just it, there's just a lot of really amazing cars there, and that has been showcasing specifically Japanese classics. But you know, like we touched on before, this is, you know, American hot rods are worth astronomical numbers if you find matching number survivors. P cars are through the roof. It's been happening, and I guess, like I said, I think it was inevitable.
Yeah.
I think it was inevitable with the cars that we have all kind of grown up on, reading about, looking at the magazines, watching online, and you know, best motoring and all these things, and we get to this point now where I think this exact conversation. Let's say if we're doing car talk in 20 years, if we're doing it, Ryan and I will be, our backs will be hurting a lot more. We might have to, you know, have some Vicks for the joints, but we'll be
have
here.
wheelchairs instead of couches.
Dude, your Wonder Civic might be worth like 200 grand in 20 years.
I think it's already worth that.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, honestly, that thing's probably worth like 50 or 60 grand, dude.
Yeah,
I think it-
it
I
doesn't
mean,
matter
someone
what it's
offered you
worth.
like 30 or 40 like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to sell it for that.
Yeah, no. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like that was
That's
that
the-
was a number then.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make that mistake. You know.
Oh, you
I
mean like
wanna
with the
keep-
NSX?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know the mistake I made.
I talked about that a couple times. Those of you who have been watching every episode, you already know that was the one that got away as far as knowing what was done to it. It was garage kept. It was maintained. A white.
Yeah, you should have
NSX.
bought that thing.
I was.
you were
I was
asking
like
me about it.
65% in,
Yeah.
and just for whatever reason, you know, there was no rush, and it just sort of like kind of slipped away.
I bought that like right at the low.
Yeah, I don't want
Like,
to talk about how much you bought it for. Okay.
Do you want to talk about it?
No. No.
We'll talk about it someday.
We'll bring it up in another episode, you
We'll
guys.
have the NSX talk at some point.
But once again, we talk about these subjects that have been brought up to us, suggested to us, things that we think about, things that you guys think about. So, what are your thoughts? Which cars do you want? Which cars do you think shouldn't be worth what they are? And why do you guys think that that vintage Japanese classic cars on a mainstream level are worth so much and so popular? Let us know what you guys think in the comments. We appreciate you, Ryan. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Car Talk.